Some people don't break down because of what you did. They break down because you did it without their permission. Tonight's topic is exactly that kind of earthquake. The kind that shakes someone so deeply they can't even form a proper sentence while trying to explain how you pulled something off. And trust me, humans hate what they can't explain. According to research in cognitive psychology, the brain becomes highly stressed when reality refuses to match its expectations. That's why some people don't just get surprised. They malfunction. They genuinely glitch like an old laptop running on vibes and hope. And that's what happened when you made a move so clean, so unexpected, so baffling that the people watching couldn't decide whether to be impressed, intimidated, or spiritually offended. They weren't prepared. They thought they had you figured out. They thought they knew your limits, your patterns, your lane. The same lane they hoped you'd stay in forever. But you didn't. You shifted in a way that their minds couldn't track. You executed something they didn't even know you were capable of. And the moment you did, something inside them snapped. Not violently, not dramatically, just in that quiet, embarrassing way that makes someone stare at the wall like Wi-Fi, just disconnected from their soul. They had a complete meltdown because your achievement didn't fit into the little box they had built for you. It didn't match the story they told themselves. It didn't follow the script they wrote in their heads. You changed the rhythm without changing the volume, and suddenly they were the ones out of sync. You didn't overpower them. You didn't out-talk them. You simply outgrew the limits they tried to place on you, and their minds couldn't keep up. So let's break down exactly why your move caused such chaos, why their explanation fell apart in real time, and why your unexpected evolution was the very last thing they were ready to experience. Let's get into it. Number 1, you exposed the limits of their logic without saying a word about logic itself. What truly shook them wasn't the outcome of what you did. It was the fact that your action revealed something they never wanted to confront: the smallness of the mental world they were operating from. They weren't just confused. They were embarrassed because everything they thought they understood about how things worked suddenly didn't apply to you. They had built their confidence on the belief that they could predict you, read you, and map out your possibilities. When you moved in a way that didn't fit their script, it forced them to see how rigid and limited their thinking really was. People like that usually operate from a narrow framework without even knowing it. Their logic is based on patterns, habits, and assumptions they've never questioned. They judge others through the lens of their own limitations. So when you did something outside the boundaries of what makes sense to them, you didn't just surprise them, you exposed how little they actually know. And the funniest part is you didn't do it to prove anything. You were simply acting from a broader perspective, one they didn't even realize existed. That is what made the impact so brutal. Moments like this hit hard because they don't just challenge someone's understanding, they challenge their identity. If they admit your move was possible, they also have to admit that their reasoning might be flawed, outdated, or too small. Most people would rather break down than accept that they were wrong on a fundamental level. It's easier for them to freeze, panic, or reject the situation entirely than to update their thinking. Your action forced them into a corner where they had to face the fact that they had underestimated you. Not because you were hiding anything, but because they were too comfortable believing they had everything figured out. You didn't defeat their logic with arguments or explanations. You defeated it simply by growing beyond what they were capable of imagining. And that kind of realization hits harder than any confrontation ever could. Number 2, you broke an unspoken hierarchy they depended on. What triggered their meltdown wasn't jealousy, and it wasn't even surprise. It was something quieter and far more dangerous. You broke a hierarchy they had been leaning on without ever admitting it to themselves. Most people walk through life carrying invisible ladders in their minds, Rankings of who is capable, who is impressive, who is predictable, who is above or below. They don't say it out loud, they don't write it down, but they rely on it every day because it gives them comfort. If they can place everyone, they can feel safe. If they can predict everyone, they can avoid feeling small. When you did what you did, you didn't just climb higher, you broke the ladder. Suddenly, their internal ranking system stopped working. The categories they used to explain the world collapsed because you refused to fit into any of them. They thought they had you filed away. This is what you can do, this is what you can't, this is how far you'll go, this is how you'll act when challenged. Then you change the pattern, not dramatically, not theatrically, just clearly enough that their wires crossed. The truth is, people can handle being outperformed. They can even handle being humbled. What they cannot handle is losing the ability to categorize. When their mental map stops matching reality, something primal reacts. It feels like losing the ground beneath their feet, even if nothing physically changed. So when you moved differently, when you succeeded in a way they didn't expect, they weren't reacting to you. They were reacting to the collapse of their own comfort. Their mind screamed, "I can't place this, I can't explain this, this breaks the order." And because humans hate disorder more than they hate being wrong, they panic. The irony is that you didn't intend to disrupt anything. You weren't out to topple their hierarchy or expose their insecurity. You simply acted as a person who refuses to stay in the box others built for them. And that alone is enough to destabilize someone who has spent years depending on those boxes to feel in control. That is why the meltdown came so fast and so hard. You didn't beat them. You revealed the fragile structure they were leaning on the entire time. And once they saw it wobble, they couldn't hold themselves steady anymore. Number 3, you proved that effort isn't what separates people. Clarity is. What rattled them deeply wasn't that you succeeded. It was that you succeeded without looking like you were fighting for it. They grind, they stress, they burn energy like it's the only currency that matters. They believe effort is the hero of every story, that the harder you try, the more worthy you become. But then you come along and show them something they never wanted to admit. Sometimes it isn't effort that moves the world forward. It's clarity. Clarity is invisible, so people underestimate it. They can't measure it, they can't brag about it, and they can't post it on social media the way they post, "I've been working so hard." But clarity is the difference between swinging wildly at a problem and touching the exact point where it breaks open. When you understood the real shape of what needed to be done, everything became simpler, cleaner, almost effortless. And that made them uneasy because it undermines their entire belief system. They thought they were competing in a test of endurance. They didn't realize it was a test of understanding. When someone operates with clarity, they stop wasting time on noise. They stop fighting shadows. They don't get lost in excuses or busy work. They walk straight to the heart of the matter and address it. Watching that from the outside can feel like watching magic, not because it's supernatural, but because it exposes how blind people can be when they mistake sweat for direction. So their meltdown came from this sudden, uncomfortable realization. They've been working hard in the wrong direction and you've been walking calmly in the right one. It's humbling in a way that feels like being caught looking foolish even when you weren't trying to be. Clarity also forces honesty. When you can see clearly, you can't hide behind "I tried" anymore. You have to admit what actually matters, what actually works, what actually moves you forward. And most people would rather stay tired than get honest. That is what you showed them without explaining a single thing. Talent isn't loud, effort isn't always noble, and progress isn't always painful. Sometimes progress is just seeing what everyone else refused to look at and acting on it without hesitation. Number 4, you acted from a place they haven't yet developed internally. The reason they spiraled wasn't because you outperformed them or stunned them with skill. It was because you acted from a place inside yourself that they simply have not reached yet, and that kind of maturity is impossible to imitate. Most people respond to situations through instinct, insecurity, or emotion. They panic, overthink, rush, or freeze. When you acted, you didn't do any of that. You moved with a quiet certainty that can't be taught, can't be rushed, and can't be faked. And seeing that in someone else forces a mirror up to their own unfinished inner work. They weren't ready for it, not intellectually, not emotionally, not spiritually. When someone acts from a deeper internal foundation, their decisions have weight and calm. They don't chase approval. They don't defend themselves. They don't justify every move. They step forward because they know. And that knowing can terrify people who have spent their entire lives guessing. This is why their explanation fell apart. They could analyze the surface all day, but they didn't have access to the root. They could describe what you did, but they could not explain why it worked, because that why sits in a part of the mind they haven't built yet. It's like watching someone speak a language you have never heard. No matter how hard you listen, you can't translate it because the structure simply isn't familiar. Inside yourself, you have learned to separate noise from signal, ego from intention, fear from possibility. Most people never make those distinctions, so their actions come tangled, heavy, reactive. When they witness someone acting cleanly, purposefully, almost effortlessly, it shakes them. Not because they wish they could do it, but because they realize they can't. Not yet. And here is the funniest truth. You didn't try to show off. You weren't performing maturity. You weren't crafting an image. You were just being aligned with yourself in a way they have not yet learned to be. That alignment creates results that look impossible to the unprepared eye, and instead of inspiring, it can actually destabilize someone who is still fighting their own internal storms. So their meltdown wasn't about you at all. It was about the gap between who they are and who they haven't allowed themselves to become. When you acted, you lit up that gap like a spotlight, and most people would rather look away than step into the light. Number 5, you didn't follow the script they expected you to read from. What broke them wasn't the result. It was the violation of expectation. People walk through life carrying unspoken scripts. How you will react, how you will fail, how you will defend yourself, how you will crumble, how you will behave under pressure. These scripts keep them comfortable because they create the illusion of control. When they can predict you, they can feel safe. When they can anticipate the next line, they can breathe. Then you stepped on stage and refused to read the script. You didn't perform the reaction they had written in their heads. You didn't panic when they thought you would. You didn't explain yourself when they thought you'd feel guilty. You didn't back down when they expected hesitation. You simply acted in a way that didn't fit any of their prepared storylines. And that kind of unpredictability isn't just surprising, it's destabilizing. Most people believe that control comes from knowledge, but the real control comes from expectation. When reality cooperates with their assumptions, their world feels orderly and manageable. When someone shatters those assumptions, even gently, it feels like the ground shifted beneath them. So when you moved differently, they weren't evaluating your action. They were scrambling to rewrite their mental film on the fly, and human brains do not rewrite well under pressure. Their internal narrator stumbled, their confidence cracked, their sense of superiority flickered, and suddenly they weren't reacting to you anymore. They were reacting to the collapse of their own storyline. You didn't need to argue, lecture, or prove anything. You just refused to be predictable, and that alone is enough to expose how deeply people depend on knowing how others will behave in order to feel like they know themselves. It's almost comedic, really. One unexpected decision, one calm deviation from the pattern, And suddenly people behave like someone pulled the plug on their sense of reality. They get loud, they get defensive, they get confused, they get emotional. Anything to rebuild a narrative that makes sense again. But you had already moved on. That is what terrified them. Not that you were different, but that you were free enough to act without checking their script first. And freedom, even in small doses, can look like chaos to someone who has never tasted it. Number 6, you made their excuses instantly useless. The meltdown came the second you did something that couldn't be explained away, couldn't be dismissed, and most painfully couldn't be turned into an excuse. Most people survive on excuses the way some people survive on oxygen. They're not always conscious of it, but those "I can't," "it's too hard," "maybe later," "that's not me," "I tried" lines form a protective shield around their identity. They let them stay safe without ever having to grow. Then you walked in and pulled the entire shield apart with one clean action. When you succeeded in a way that didn't fit any of their excuses, their whole narrative collapsed. They couldn't say, "It's impossible," because you just made it look possible. They couldn't say, "It takes too long," because you did it faster than their patience could tolerate. They couldn't say, "I don't have what it takes," because you didn't rely on anything they didn't technically have access to as well. You didn't argue with them. You didn't lecture them. You just removed the weapon they used on themselves every day. And when someone loses the excuses they've spent years building, they feel exposed in a way that's almost physical. Excuses are comforting because they allow people to feel good without changing anything. They cradle the ego while keeping it small. But when you demonstrate, calmly and clearly, that progress is not a mythical gift, but a practical choice, it forces a realization they were not ready for. Maybe the barrier was never external. Maybe it was always internal. That realization hurts more than failure ever could. So they panicked, not because you did something extraordinary, but because they suddenly saw how ordinary it actually was, and how they had been hiding behind stories instead of stepping forward. The funniest part is this: their excuses didn't die because you proved them wrong. They died because you proved something larger. That possibility is always there, quietly waiting, and most people simply refuse to look at it. When you act in a way that makes excuses irrelevant, you don't just inspire people, you expose them. And exposure is uncomfortable. That's why their meltdown felt so dramatic. When the shield drops, people either grow or they break. Number 7, you force them to face the version of themselves they abandoned. This is the one that hits deepest, the one that can't be explained away with logic or pride or sarcasm. When you did what you did, you didn't just impress them, you reminded them of someone they used to be or hoped to be before life taught them to shrink. Everyone carries a shadow version of themselves, younger, braver, more curious, more willing to fail, more willing to try. Most people leave that version behind slowly, almost without noticing, until one day the gap between who they are and who they could have been feels like a canyon. Your actions suddenly lit that canyon up. They weren't reacting to you. They were reacting to memory. Memory of ambition they buried, dreams they mocked, courage they traded for comfort. When they saw you reach for something and actually take it, it wasn't jealousy that made their breath catch. It was grief. Grief for a younger self they've stopped visiting. It's easy to cheer for someone when their success fits neatly into the story you've written about them. It's easy when it feels deserved or expected. But when someone breaks pattern, grows in a direction you never imagined, and does it without apology, it forces a confrontation with the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. People can ignore advice, they can ignore warnings, they can ignore motivation, but they cannot ignore a living reminder of what they once wanted to be. That reminder slices through excuses, pride, and defensiveness, because it speaks a language older than ego. So they melted down because they felt seen in a way they did not consent to. They felt measured not against you, but against their own forgotten intentions. And that is brutally uncomfortable. You didn't do this to shame them. You didn't do it to compete. You simply advanced while they stayed still. Growth is contagious, but it is also confronting. When one person steps forward, it forces everyone watching to notice how far they've been standing still. Some people will feel inspired. Some people will feel threatened. Some will pretend they never felt anything at all. But the truth is this: when you awaken the abandoned version of someone, you awaken responsibility. And responsibility is heavier than most people are ready to carry. That is why the impact felt so violent, even though your action was calm. Because growth always forces us to choose, revisit who we were, or accept who we've become. Number 8, you solved a problem they had been overcomplicating for years. The shock they felt wasn't about your success. It was about the sudden realization that they had been fighting a shadow while you dealt with the real thing. Most people mistake complexity for importance. They wrap simple problems in layers of overthinking, excuses, rituals, emotional baggage, and imaginary obstacles until the problem grows into something unmanageable. Then they get attached to that complexity because it makes them feel justified, special, or even victimized. When you came along and sliced through all that noise, they didn't know whether to applaud or panic. You didn't invent a new secret technique or pull out hidden talent. You just recognized the core of the issue and addressed it directly. And that is something most people never learn how to do because it requires honesty. Honesty about what actually matters and what they've been distracting themselves with. So when you solved it quickly, cleanly, almost effortlessly, it wasn't the solution that rattled them. It was the mirror. They suddenly saw years of wasted mental energy, years of dramatic storytelling about how hard it was, years of procrastination disguised as strategy. And realizing that is like feeling a tiny crack inside your self-image. People can tolerate failure. They can even tolerate mediocrity. What they cannot tolerate is realizing that their suffering was optional. The funniest part is that overcomplication feels productive. It feels like progress. When you're busy being confused, you can convince yourself you're working. When you're busy making excuses, you can convince yourself you're trying. When you're busy adding layers, you can convince yourself it's impossible. But when someone walks in and shows that the entire knot can be untied with a single understanding, it exposes how fragile those illusions really are. Their meltdown came from that exposure. It wasn't that they couldn't do it. It was that they hadn't been willing to look at it clearly. And clarity is more threatening than difficulty because clarity demands responsibility. You didn't embarrass them. You didn't outsmart them. You simply refused to participate in the self-made maze they'd been wandering for years. And when someone steps out of a maze you've been lost in for too long, it forces you to confront a truth most people spend a lifetime avoiding. Maybe the problem was never as big as you made it. Number 9. You didn't sabotage yourself the way they expected you to. This one shook them because it took away a comfort they didn't even know they were holding on to, the comfort of prediction. Most people keep mental notes on others' weaknesses, patterns, and repeat mistakes. It's not always malicious. It's human. When you can expect someone to fail a certain way, you can feel superior without actually doing anything. When you can expect someone to sabotage themselves, you can rest easy because the story stays the same. Then you broke the pattern. You didn't fall into the same traps. You didn't panic when pressure built. You didn't give up when it became inconvenient. You didn't repeat old habits just because they were familiar. And that alone can feel like betrayal to someone who has built their understanding of you on those mistakes. Self-sabotage is predictable. Growth is not. When they watched you act differently, calmly, deliberately, intelligently, they felt something collapse inside them. Not jealousy, not envy. Something more basic, the loss of a narrative they relied on. They thought they understood you. They thought they could anticipate your moves. They thought they could map your limits. You removed the map. And when someone can no longer map another person, they panic in ways they can't explain, because suddenly they're confronted with a truth they've been dodging their whole life. People can change. People can outgrow the identity you assign them. People can rewrite themselves without asking for permission. What scared them most is that you did it without making a show of it. You didn't declare a transformation. You didn't lecture anyone. You simply acted like someone who finally stopped fighting themselves. And when someone stops fighting themselves, their progress looks unnatural to people who have been fighting themselves for years. It's not that they didn't want you to succeed. It's that they weren't ready to accept a version of you that didn't fit their old assumptions. Accepting that would mean accepting that their predictions were shallow, their judgments incomplete, and their comfort built on someone else's stagnation. So their meltdown was really an internal collapse, the collapse of a story they thought was permanent. You didn't defeat them. You didn't embarrass them. You didn't even prove them wrong. You simply refused to repeat a cycle they thought defined you. And that kind of independence can feel like disruption, even when it's just growth. Number 10, you operated with a level of emotional detachment they couldn't imitate. What rattled them wasn't your skill or your outcome. It was your composure. Most people live in their emotions like they're trapped in a room with the lights flicking on and off. They react first, think later, and spend the rest of the day cleaning up the chaos they created in those first few seconds. When you operated without being pulled in every direction by feeling, they didn't know what to call it. Calm, control, confidence, no. It felt like something foreign, something unreachable. Emotional detachment isn't coldness. It's clarity under pressure. It's being able to notice fear without letting it drive. It's hearing doubt without letting it shout over reason. It's staying present when everyone else is busy fighting ghosts in their own heads. And when someone demonstrates that in real time, it exposes how much of other people's lives are run by impulses they never learned to question. You weren't detached to impress anyone. You were detached because you understood something they don't. Emotions are signals, not commands. Most people treat every feeling like a marching order. If they feel overwhelmed, they stop. If they feel threatened, they lash out. If they feel unsure, they freeze. You treated those same signals as data, not destiny. And that is terrifying to watch. Because when someone refuses to spiral, it forces everyone around them to see how deeply they've been spiraling all along. It also reveals a hidden truth. Emotional detachment isn't something you can copy by wanting it. You can't fake it, you can't rehearse it, and you can't borrow it. It grows slowly through experience, through failure, through learning to sit with discomfort without surrendering to it. When they saw you do it naturally, it wasn't envy that shook them. It was the awareness of how far they have yet to go. What they interpreted as superhuman calm was actually just maturity speaking in a language they haven't learned yet. So they melted down because they felt outmatched, not on the battlefield, but in the mind. Because when someone moves through a storm without losing their footing, it exposes how unstable everyone else's ground has been. You didn't overpower them. You didn't intimidate them on purpose. You simply refused to let emotion take the steering wheel. And for people who have been passengers in their own lives for years, that kind of control can feel like witnessing something impossible. Number 11. You succeeded in a way that didn't require permission from anyone. What disrupted them wasn't the success itself. It was the independence behind it. Most people walk through life carrying invisible fingerprints on their decisions. Approval, validation, tradition, expectation, audience, audience, audience. They want someone to nod before they step, someone to cheer before they try, someone to bless before they commit. That dependence feels safe because it spreads responsibility. If they fail, they can blame the lack of permission. If they succeed, they can share the credit. Then you came along and didn't ask. You didn't wait for applause. You didn't chase acknowledgement. You didn't seek reassurance, and you certainly didn't need a witness to make it real. You acted because you decided to act. And that kind of self-authority is extremely unsettling to people who have outsourced their courage. When someone moves through life with their own internal permission, it exposes an ugly truth. Most people don't fail because they can't. They fail because they're waiting for the right moment, waiting for the right person, waiting for encouragement, waiting for approval, waiting for certainty. You removed that entire waiting room, and they felt it like a slap they didn't see coming. Because seeing someone succeed without permission forces a question they can't answer comfortably. Why didn't I do that myself? And that question is dangerous because it leads to responsibility, and responsibility is heavy. What they saw in you wasn't rebellion or arrogance, it was autonomy. A person who knows their own worth doesn't negotiate it. A person who trusts their own direction doesn't auction it off to the crowd. A person who acts without permission is someone who cannot be controlled by expectation, social pressure, or guilt. That frightens people more than talent ever could. When you succeed on your own terms, you collapse the illusions they've been living inside, that they need a green light, that they need a blessing, that they need someone else to make their dreams valid. You didn't just win, you rewrote the rules. You showed that legitimacy is not handed out, it is claimed. And in that moment, their meltdown wasn't about you at all. It was about them realizing how long they've been living like guests in their own lives. When you stop asking for permission, you force everyone watching to confront how rarely they've given it to themselves. Number 12. You made the impossible look obvious in hindsight. This is the kind of impact that leaves people staring at their own thoughts like they've been caught sleeping on their feet. When you did what you did, it wasn't the scale of the achievement that rattled them, it was the clarity that came after. Once you revealed the path, once the pieces suddenly made sense, they felt something close to embarrassment wash over them. Not because they were beaten, but because they saw too late how simple it actually was. Humans love to declare things impossible because impossible feels safe. It protects them from effort, from risk, from failure, and most painfully, from responsibility. When something is truly impossible, you can walk away with dignity, intact. But when someone steps forward and shows that the impossible was only hidden behind poor perspective, that protection shatters. You didn't perform a miracle. You didn't bend physics or rewrite life's rules. You simply understood the structure of the problem better than they did. And understanding has a ruthless side. It exposes people to their own blind spots. The moment the solution becomes obvious, it forces a confrontation. How did I not see this? And that question hits harder than any defeat because it reveals not incompetence but complacency. It reveals how comfortable people get living with confusion as long as it excuses their stagnation. When you make the impossible look obvious, you're not just solving a problem. You're dismantling a myth people built around themselves. The myth that difficulty is always inherent, when most of the time it is constructed. The meltdown isn't emotional weakness, it's cognitive dissonance. Their mind built a fortress around the idea that this thing couldn't be done, and your action walked through it like it was made of cardboard. Suddenly, their identity, crafted around being realistic, practical, grounded, feels hollow. Because realism without insight is just fear dressed up in logic. You didn't humiliate them. You didn't lecture them. You didn't even try. You simply illuminated a path they hadn't thought to look for, and once lit, the path looked so obvious it hurt. That is the real power of clarity. It turns the impossible into a question people can no longer avoid. And that realization can break someone far more deeply than failure ever could. Number 13. You acted with timing they couldn't replicate even if they tried. Timing is one of those things people talk about like it's luck, when in reality it's a skill built out of awareness, patience, and trust in yourself. When you did what you did, it wasn't just that you acted. It was when you acted, and that is the part that shook them, because timing can't be taught through tutorials or copied through imitation. You can hand someone knowledge, you can hand them technique, but you can't hand them instinct sharpened by experience. Most people act either too early or too late. Too early because they're chasing approval, chasing momentum, chasing the feeling of doing something even when it isn't the right moment. Too late because they're waiting for perfection, certainty, permission, or that imaginary sign from the universe that never shows up. Timing sits in the space between impatience and fear, and very few people ever learn to breathe comfortably in that space. When you stepped forward at exactly the right moment, they couldn't process it because it didn't fit their understanding of cause and effect. They thought results came from brute force or desperation or sheer effort, but you showed them a different equation. Awareness plus calm plus courage equals impact. That kind of timing unnerves people because it removes their favorite explanation. If only I had done it the same way. They can't do it the same way because they can't reproduce the internal state that made that moment possible. They can copy the action, but not the alignment behind it. And without alignment, the action loses half its power. When they saw you land it perfectly, they weren't just impressed. They felt outdated. They felt like they'd been playing the wrong game, or playing it with blinders on, or playing it on a clock they never bothered to read. Timing is humility in motion. It's listening to reality instead of shouting at it. It's knowing when to hold still and when to strike. It's understanding that sometimes the difference between failure and brilliance is not effort. It's precision. So their meltdown came from this sudden, unsettling clarity. You weren't lucky. You weren't gifted in some unreachable way, and you weren't doing anything supernatural. You were simply present enough to act when the universe opened a door. And people who have spent years knocking on walls do not take kindly to watching someone walk through a door they never even noticed existed. Number 14, you revealed that their doubt had nothing to do with you and everything to do with their own limits. This is the most uncomfortable truth of all, the one people can't swallow without choking on it. When you did what you did, their doubt collapsed like a house built on sand, and for the first time they saw that the problem was never you. It was them. Their doubt wasn't a careful assessment, wasn't wisdom, wasn't realism. It was projection. And projection is a ruthless liar because it dresses up insecurity as insight and calls it honesty. When they told themselves you can't, what they really meant was, I can't imagine myself doing that. When they argued it's too hard, they weren't speaking about the task. They were speaking about their own threshold for discomfort. When they warned don't expect too much, they weren't protecting you. They were protecting their own fragile image of what is possible. So when you succeeded, when you stepped beyond the border they thought was unbreakable, it felt personal to them even though it wasn't. It felt like betrayal because it exposed how much of their advice, their skepticism, their caution, their realism was actually fear wearing a mask. People love to pretend that doubt is noble, that it's the voice of reason. But more often, doubt is just the echo of a limit they refuse to examine. And when someone breaks through that echo, it leaves them standing in silence, confronted by a truth they can't argue with. Their ceiling was never universal. It was private. That realization can destabilize a person because it removes the illusion of righteousness. They can't hide behind common sense when common sense has been outpaced by courage. They can't dismiss you when the evidence sits in front of them, undeniable. They can't blame the world when the world has clearly made room for you. You revealed without speaking that their doubt was always a confession of where they stopped, where they surrendered, where they became comfortable with less than they were capable of. And no one enjoys hearing their own confession read back to them. The meltdown came because truth is heavy when it has nowhere to go. But here is the quiet beauty in it. When you expose someone's limits, you also show them that limits can be rewritten. Whether they choose to pick up that possibility, that is no longer about you at all. When you strip it all down, their meltdown wasn't about you at all. It was about the limits they never questioned, the scripts they never rewrote, the excuses they carried like shields, and the comfort they wrapped themselves in because growth felt too dangerous. What you did wasn't just accomplish something, it revealed things they weren't ready to see. Clarity where they lived in confusion, calm where they lived in chaos, independence where they lived in permission, courage where they lived in hesitation, timing where they lived in panic, and possibility where they lived in doubt. You didn't defeat them, you didn't embarrass them, you didn't outshine them on purpose. You simply became the version of yourself they could not imagine. And that alone is enough to shake someone to their core. Every time someone grows in front of others, it forces a choice. Either you get inspired or you get defensive. Either you follow the new horizon or you cling harder to the old walls. What people do next says more about them than it ever does about you. So remember this always. When someone cannot explain how you pulled something off, it is usually because they are not fighting you. They are fighting the realization that they have been fighting themselves for years. If this hit home, if it made you think, if it gave you even a small aha moment, then do me a huge favor. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next deep breakdowns. Like the video if it spoke to you. Comment and tell me which point shook you the most, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay blessed always.